If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the odd one out, the misfit, the guy nobody expected much from, stick around, because I was that guy too. Just another face in the crowd, until a phone call from a government number changed everything. What happened next? Let's just say, the man who used to be overlooked ended up with clearance so high I couldn't even tell my own mother what I did. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Before the uniform, before the secrets, before I had any idea what I was really capable of, I was born in a small town outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Just another post-war kid with a buzz cut and a lunch pail, raised on boxed cereal and Sunday sermons. My dad worked at the paper mill. My mom stayed home unless the bills started barking too loud, then she cleaned offices at night. Life wasn't bad. It was just average, ordinary, predictable. And I played the role well. I went to school, raised my hand when I knew the answer, and kept my mouth shut when I didn't. Played Little League till I aged out. Helped mow the neighbors' lawns. Said yes, sir, and no, ma'am, like I was supposed to. But deep down, I always had this gnawing feeling, like I was seeing the world through a window no one else noticed. I'd sit in math class wondering why the teacher never questioned the rules of the textbook. I'd stare at the ceiling during church, counting the acoustics, imagining how sound bounced off each corner. Like I couldn't stop analyzing everything. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't dumb. I was wired different. I remember this one afternoon in 7th grade. We were doing a group project on American inventors. Everyone else chose Edison, Bell, the Wright brothers. I picked Hedy Lamarr. My teacher raised an eyebrow. You mean the movie star? Yeah, I said, but also the person who invented frequency-hopping technology that helped us win World War II. The class laughed. The teacher moved on. And I felt it again, that familiar sting, like I was always the guy who thought too much, too weird, too sideways. That feeling never left. At church picnics, I'd be the kid off to the side, listening more than talking. At family gatherings, I could sense who was lying about being happy. At school, I always knew when a substitute teacher was bluffing their way through the lesson. You'd think being that perceptive would be a gift. But in a small town like mine, it just made you different. And different wasn't good. By the time I was a teenager, I had pretty much accepted my role, background character. I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the athlete. I wasn't the troublemaker. I was the one they forgot to count. That all changed the summer I turned 17. My Uncle Ray came to visit from San Diego. He was my mom's brother, former Navy, now working some hush-hush civilian job that he never talked about. I liked him instantly. He looked you straight in the eye when he talked, listened hard, said very little. But when he did speak, people shut up and paid attention. He brought a box of puzzles for my little cousin, mechanical ones made of wood and brass. I was sitting on the porch that evening watching my cousin struggle with one shaped like a star. I picked it up absent-mindedly and solved it in under 2 minutes. Uncle Ray raised an eyebrow. "Try this one," he said, handing me another. Then another, and another. 15 minutes later, I'd solved all 6. He didn't say much, just gave me a quiet nod. But I saw something in his eyes. Recognition. Like he saw something in me that nobody else had ever stopped long enough to notice. I didn't know it yet, but that moment lit the fuse. After high school, I drifted. No college money, no real direction. I worked odd jobs. Construction, security, even cleaned out basements for a while. I wasn't lazy, I just didn't fit anywhere. Every job I took, I ended up the guy fixing systems, organizing things others couldn't, noticing patterns before they were problems. But nobody paid me for that. I was paid to lift boxes or follow instructions. There was one week I worked at a shipping facility. They had an issue with packages going missing. I figured out in 2 days that one of the scanners near Dock 3 was rerouting shipments to an unlogged warehouse ID. Told the manager. He nodded politely, said, "Stick to your job." 2 weeks later, the same manager got fired for the exact thing I warned him about. Story of my life. I kept thinking maybe I just hadn't found my place, that maybe I was the type of guy who needed a different kind of system, one that wasn't built for the average. That's when Uncle Ray called me out of the blue. "Hey," he said, "I'm sending someone your way. Old friend of mine. He'll ask you a few questions. Just be yourself." A few days later, I'm sitting across from a man in a plain gray suit at the diner near my apartment. He didn't say who he was with. Didn't need to. He asked about the puzzles, about how I spotted the shipping scam, about the time I mapped out all the fire exits at my cousin's wedding venue just for fun. I thought it was a job interview. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail with a federal seal and instructions to report for screening. The location was blacked out. The number I was told to call didn't exist on public records. And for the first time in my life, I felt something click. Not fear, not pride, purpose. I didn't even pack a bag. The letter said 3 days, no phones, no electronics, no personal items, just show up, breathe, and follow instructions. I arrived at an unmarked airstrip outside Dayton, Ohio. 2 guys in matching polos and mirrored sunglasses met me with a clipboard and silence. One checked my ID. The other placed a strip of black tape over my name. "You're subject 12 now," one of them said. I cracked a joke about losing my identity. He didn't laugh. We flew in a prop plane. Low, quiet, under radar. No announcements, no window views. Just the hum of the engine and the quiet pressure in my chest that told me this wasn't training for a desk job. We landed in what I later learned was an old military facility, one that hadn't officially existed since 1974. There were 17 of us in total, all men, all different. One was a math teacher from Detroit. Another was a linguist who'd spent time in war zones. There was even a guy who used to train bomb-sniffing dogs, and a quiet older man who had scars up and down both arms and never once took off his gloves. We weren't told what the job was. They just put us through hell. Cognitive drills that ran 16 hours straight. Pattern recognition tests so complex they made your brain ache. Physical exams, sure, but not the usual kind. Not push-ups and sit-ups. These were about breath control under pressure, eye movement tracking, heart rate during simulated threats. At one point, they dropped us in a pitch-black warehouse with nothing but a flashlight and a riddle. I found my way out in 8 minutes. The average time was 37. After 5 days of that, I was sure I'd wash out. Not because I couldn't keep up, I could, but because I still didn't get it. I didn't know what they wanted from me. Then came the interview. It wasn't in a room. It was in the woods. I was blindfolded, walked half a mile by a guy who didn't say a word and told to sit on a tree stump until someone came. 2 hours passed. Finally, a man sat across from me. No uniform. Just a soft southern drawl and a folder in his hand. "You ever notice," he said, "how some people see the world a half step faster than others?" I nodded. "You think you're one of those people?" I hesitated. "Sometimes, depends on the room I'm in." He smiled, just barely. "We've been watching you longer than you think." The next morning, 5 of us were told to stay. The rest were sent home with envelopes marked, "Thank you for your participation." That was the last time I used my real name. I was issued new credentials, a new history. Even my social security record was flagged in some invisible way, so that if a bank or agency looked too closely, they'd find nothing. They called it scrubbing. It felt like being erased from the world, but for the first time I wasn't invisible because I was overlooked. I was invisible because I was being used for something very specific. I'd been assigned to what they called a sensitive unit, not officially under any known branch, though funded through defense intelligence. My file was classified above TS-SCI. That meant even most generals couldn't access it. It was the kind of clearance where you stop asking questions. Because if you ask, they'll wonder if you're the kind of guy who talks. I was transferred to a facility buried in the hills of Utah. Not on any satellite map. No roads led in. We had to be choppered in through a disguised canyon once a month. That's where I met the others. They called us oblique operators, specialists not trained to fight but to think. We weren't meant to storm buildings or shoot targets. We were there to solve problems too complex for standard military procedure. Real-time decisions based on live data, human psychology, enemy behavior, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and international law, all rolled into a matter of seconds. The guy next to me could tell if someone was lying based on micro-blinks. The woman 2 desks over could reconstruct entire black market routes just by looking at shipping anomalies. And me? They said I had a gift for decision chains. They'd show me a scenario. A target vanished in Cairo, a diplomat goes dark in Bogota, a bridge goes down in Belgrade, and I could map out what would happen next 5 steps ahead like a game of 3D chess. That was my gift. I couldn't always explain it, but I could see it coming. And now, I finally had a place where that meant something. I'd never felt that before, belonging. Not like this. These weren't guys who needed you to talk about your childhood or prove yourself with muscles. They didn't care where you came from. What they cared about was whether you could hold your edge. You either added value to the mission, or you were gone. And for once in my life, I wasn't just adding value. I was helping lead missions most people wouldn't believe existed. My favorite part? No one back home had any idea. To them, I was just another guy who left town and disappeared. They didn't know I'd gone underground. They didn't know I'd found my calling. And the most surprising thing? I wasn't scared. I was ready. They never called it a mission. That word was too Hollywood. Instead, they said, "We need you to run a scenario." But this one felt different from the jump. It started with an encrypted file dropped onto my desk at 0400. No names, no locations, just a cluster of signals, dates, cargo manifests, and a pattern. I studied it for 15 minutes before I realized what I was looking at. Someone, or something, was moving high-grade nuclear material through civilian cargo lanes, using shell companies that didn't officially exist. The type of operation that slips right past traditional defense because it doesn't break any obvious rules. But to us, it lit up like a flare. And when I ran the model forward, tracing where these cargo containers were heading, who signed off, which ports would ignore it, the endpoint hit me like a punch. Houston, 4th of July weekend. 3 million people expected downtown. This wasn't a test. We didn't have jurisdiction, not in the official sense. Homeland Security wasn't notified. The FBI wouldn't have known what to look for. And the CIA, too slow. This required what my commanding officer called clean hands, dirty boots. In and out, no trail, no headlines. Our team was 5. A logistics ghost from Ohio, 2 ex-NSA field ops who now worked under civilian cover, a former Navy EOD tech with a knack for black market lingo, and me. I was the one holding the chessboard. We had 72 hours. The cargo was moving by rail under the name of a fertilizer company. Legal on paper, but 2 ingredients inside were never supposed to be in the same box, unless someone was building a homemade dirty bomb. We tracked the shipment to a rail yard outside of Tulsa. That's where things went sideways. Our field guy got made. Somebody at the yard tipped off the handlers. They rerouted the train within 10 minutes and dumped the GPS pings. That's when I had to call an audible. Using nothing but fuel purchase patterns and satellite thermal scans, I traced the convoy to a private hangar in rural Arkansas. No paperwork, no flight plan, just a jet fueled and waiting. I made the call. Intercept before takeoff. No weapons, no uniform, just 2 men, a wire cutter, and a 2-minute window. We stopped the plane 41 seconds before wheels up. Inside, 2 crates lined in lead, radiation levels off the charts. We were back at base within 12 hours. No debrief, no medals. Just a quiet nod from the program director and sealed files. Later, I learned the plane was headed for Port-au-Prince. From there, who knows? Venezuela? Tehran? Some rich lunatic in the Caucasus? Didn't matter. What mattered was this. No bomb, no headlines, no panic. That's how we measured success. You know what the hardest part was? Coming home the next weekend for my cousin's wedding. Everyone was dancing and drunk and laughing about TikTok videos while I stood at the edge of the room thinking about how close we came to losing a city. Nobody knew. Nobody ever would. That mission earned us silence, not praise. But it came at a price. One of the team, the Navy guy, didn't come back clean. Not physically. Something about that cargo triggered a reaction in his lungs. He started coughing up blood within a week. He refused treatment. Said it wasn't worth the paper trail. I sat with him the night before he disappeared from the program. "You still think it's worth it?" I asked him. He grinned, blood on his teeth. "Only if you don't waste it." I never forgot that. After that op, something shifted in me. I wasn't just the guy solving puzzles anymore. I was the guy whose decisions now carried real weight. Lives depended on what I saw, or didn't. And that responsibility, it didn't scare me. It clarified me. I started leading small teams, coordinating short-range scenarios that involved domestic threats most people will never hear about. Fake passports, rigged HVAC systems, compromised voting machines, all of it hidden in plain sight. People think war looks like bullets and sandstorms, but the new war? It looks like spreadsheets, power outages, and software bugs designed to take down entire hospitals. And the worst part? Most of the threats never come from where you expect. That's when I really began to understand what kind of machine I was part of. There are levels to the military, the ones you see, uniforms, ranks, press briefings. Then there are levels below that, black budgets, third-party contractors, units that aren't listed in any defense registry. But the deepest level? That's where people like me operate. No branch, no badge, no retirement ceremony, just a job. Solve the unsolvable before the unthinkable happens. And I'd finally found peace in that. Not because I loved the danger, but because I finally stopped feeling like I was broken. I wasn't broken at all. I was built for this. Most folks think the hardest part of high-stakes work is the danger. It's not. It's the waiting, the silence, the pretending. You spend 3 weeks prepping for an op that takes 4 minutes. And if you screw it up, you don't just fail. People die. Maybe hundreds, maybe more. And the worst part? No one ever knows. You can't go home and tell your wife, "Hey, honey, I stopped a biological attack today." You can't explain to your brother why you missed Thanksgiving 3 years in a row. You can't tell your dad what you do, even though you know it's the one thing that would have finally made him proud. Pressure isn't the explosion. It's the weight of carrying secrets that never go off. But what keeps you from cracking? The guys next to you. There was Sal, former Army Ranger turned intel fixer. Big guy, voice like gravel. He once diffused a situation by calmly dismantling a cartel member's phone while the man held a knife to his throat. There was Ellis, the tech whisperer. Could reroute a server through 3 embassies in under 10 minutes. wore mismatched socks and spoke 7 languages but barely said a word unless something exploded. And then there was Merrick, my shadow. He joined the program 6 months after me, but you'd think we'd grown up together. He understood the silence, the patterns, the burden. We didn't have to speak to know what the other was thinking. That kind of bond only forms under fire. We never said, "I love you." We never talked about feelings. But I would have died for him without blinking. Still would. It was supposed to be a minor intercept, a chemical weapons leak linked to a rogue cell in Eastern Europe. In and out. Confirm the source, tag the cargo, exfil. Only it wasn't. Turned out we were walking into a setup. Someone knew we were coming, and they had gear that shouldn't have been in civilian hands. We lost 2 agents on the first night. Sal took a piece of shrapnel in the ribs but stayed on mission. Merrick and I barely made it out, ducking fire through alleyways with nothing but a comms jammer and bad intel. I remember hiding in the basement of a condemned textile mill, Merrick bleeding from the arm, both of us running on 2 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline. He looked at me and said, "If we die here, no one's going to know. You okay with that?" And I told him the truth. Only if it means someone else gets to live. When we finally made it out, 3 days late, with no backup and no bodies to bring home, there wasn't a handshake or salute waiting for us. Just a flight back in silence, a hotel room booked under fake names, and another encrypted file waiting in my inbox 2 days later. That's how it worked. You never got closure. You never got applause. You just kept going. Because if you didn't, if even one of us broke, the whole damn wall would crack. And trust me, the wall is thin. I missed my mother's funeral. The mission overlapped. I was in Bogota tracking a silent financier who funded chaos with a Bible and a briefcase. When I got back, I stood outside her old house in the rain. Didn't knock. Couldn't. My sister still thought I was working tech support out of Seattle. She'd never believe me if I told her the truth anyway. You start to wonder, how much of your life is left when you've erased every part that matters? Birthdays, holidays, old friends who stopped calling. You lose yourself by inches. And some nights you wonder if the country you're protecting even deserves it. But then something always brings you back. Sometimes it's a news report about a disaster that never happened. Sometimes it's watching kids play in a park, knowing that shipment you intercepted last week was meant for them. Sometimes it's just a stranger at the airport, alive, breathing, unaware that their tomorrow almost didn't happen. And those moments, they keep you sane. They're rare, but they're enough. We had a tradition. Every time someone made it through a tough op, we didn't celebrate. We didn't get drunk or brag. We just left a poker chip in their locker. Red for close call, black for mission success against odds. Gold. Well, I only ever saw one gold chip. Merrick left it in my locker after Cairo. No note, just the chip. He never said why, but I kept it in my wallet to this day. A reminder that even if the world never sees what you've done, someone does. Someone who was there with you, in the dark, with boots on the ground and skin in the game. That's the only validation I ever needed. It was my 12th year in. 12 years of living between names, between countries, between the truth and whatever lie I had to tell next. The brass had pulled me off active rotation 6 months earlier. Said I needed space. I knew what that meant. They were testing my shelf life, seeing if I'd crack, or worse, if I'd start talking. Then the call came, not through encrypted comms, not on paper. It was Sal. His voice was tight. "Need you back in, now. Not optional." He gave me a name, Alexei Voronov, the kind of ghost we weren't supposed to speak out loud, Russian-born, Western-educated, A hybrid threat, part spy, part CEO. One of those men who could fund a coup and destabilize a continent using nothing more than offshore spreadsheets and deep-fake press releases. And we'd just gotten intel that he was orchestrating a digital blackout on U.S. soil, the kind that would make 9/11 look like a system update. We had 96 hours, 4 days to locate Voronov, intercept his network, isolate the key nodes, and dismantle the entire operation without alerting any government, including our own. Because if this went public, Wall Street would collapse in an hour. The power grid in the Midwest would short. Hospitals would lose patient data. Drones meant to protect would turn into weapons of chaos. This wasn't a war. It was a kill switch. And I was leading the team tasked with pulling the wires out before someone flipped it. We landed in Estonia under diplomatic cover, posed as a cybersecurity research crew. Nobody asked questions, probably because we looked like ghosts with government teeth. Voronov had buried himself in layers of anonymity, but the one thing men like him always needed was ego. He liked to watch his chaos unfold, so we hacked the hacks, traced his keystrokes back through a side channel. It was thin, almost invisible, but I caught a rhythm, a pattern in the way his malware replicated. It matched an old Soviet cipher I'd seen once before, years ago. Just like a fingerprint. We followed it to a villa outside Lake Ohrid, neutral territory, surrounded by men with cold eyes and trigger fingers. No legal entry, no backup, just us. We breached at 3:17 a.m., no warning, no comms. We were in and out in under 8 minutes, grabbed Voronov, burned the servers, and ghosted through the trees like smoke. Only, it wasn't clean. Merrick took a round to the chest. We carried him out under fire, bled all over the snow. His vitals dropped at 4:02. I stayed with him while the others got us to exfil. He looked me in the eyes and whispered something I'll never forget. Don't become what they made you to be. Not all the way. Then he closed his eyes. And I knew, before we even hit the chopper, that he was gone. Voronov disappeared from public record. No trial, no headlines. The kill switch was dismantled. The code scattered into 1,000 pieces across 10 secure vaults in one guy's memory. Mine. I should have felt like a hero. Instead, I felt hollow. Merrick was gone. Sal was pulled back into deep shadow. Ellis transferred to drone overwatch. And me? I sat in a safe house in Berlin for 3 weeks, watching pigeons fight over scraps in the snow, trying to remember what it felt like to live for myself. I couldn't. That's when I knew I was done. I left the program the only way you can. Quietly, under review, with 6 years of psychiatric checks and a signed document that says, if you ever speak of what you've done, you'll vanish so fast no one will remember your name. They gave me a new identity. A legal one this time. Clean, civilian. I moved west, bought a cabin in Montana, grew a beard, started pretending I liked coffee, tried to live like the rest of the world. But I'll be honest with you. You don't come back from the shadows unchanged. You carry every decision, every life you couldn't save, every birthday you missed, every lie you told to people you loved just to keep them safe. But you also carry this strange peace. Because when you know what real danger looks like, what real evil is capable of, you stop sweating the small stuff, and you start seeing people a little clearer. Every so often I still get the feeling, like a nudge, when I see something in the news that doesn't add up, or when a strange car parks across the street for too long. I know the game isn't really over, because guys like me, we don't get retirement. We just get quiet, until the next time they need someone who doesn't exist. When you walk away from a world built on secrecy, the first thing you notice is how loud silence can be. There are no more mission updates, no more blacked out schedules, no more encrypted pings in the middle of the night. just birds, just wine through pine, just you and everything you've spent years pushing down. For a while I tried to forget. I told myself I was just a regular man now. Wake up, eat breakfast, chop firewood, wave at the mailman. But that world I left behind, it never really left me. I kept the gold poker chip, the one Merrick left me. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch at sunrise and roll it between my fingers like a coin toss, thinking of all the close calls, all the lives protected, all the ones we couldn't save. And that's when I realized something. They could take my name out of records. They could delete files, scrub footage, burn paper trails. But they couldn't erase the impact. That father who got to walk his daughter down the aisle because we stopped a bomb from going off. That child who got vaccinated in time because we rerouted a hijacked medical shipment. That town that never lost power because I found the breach in the grid. Those people will never know me, but they're living the lives we fought for. And that's enough. About 2 years into civilian life, I got a letter. No return address, just a card. Inside, a photo. It was of a little boy in front of a school in Ukraine, holding a toy I'd once hidden in a humanitarian drop to distract a cartel checkpoint. Back then, we thought he wouldn't survive the winter. Now, here he was, alive, grinning, missing a front tooth. There was no note, just a second gold chip taped to the back. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about saving lives, it was about preserving possibility. Since then, I've made it a point to show up, not to ops or missions, but to people. I mentor young veterans, not the flashy kind, the ones still trying to figure out why they're angry or restless or numb. I speak at high schools under an alias, teaching kids how to spot misinformation, how to think in systems. Sometimes I just sit at the diner and listen to old men who have no one else to talk to. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And for the first time, I don't need a code name to feel like I matter. If you're watching this, maybe you served. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you spent your whole life working hard, staying quiet, doing the right thing, and wondering if it ever made a difference. Let me tell you something straight. It did. The world doesn't spin because of heroes in capes. It spins because of quiet men who show up day after day and carry the weight without applause. You don't need a uniform to serve. You don't need medals to be honorable. And just because your story was never told doesn't mean it didn't matter. We spend so much of our lives trying to be seen, trying to be understood, trying to prove we're not invisible. But the truth is, the most powerful work we do is the work no one sees, the kindness no one claps for, the wisdom passed down without needing credit, the second chances we give others and ourselves. If I've learned anything from the life I lived, it's this. Your purpose isn't found in recognition, it's found in responsibility. And no matter your age, background, or regrets, it is never too late to become the man you were meant to be. Not for applause, but for the next man watching you, wondering if he can carry the weight too. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt like the world passed you by or that your quiet service never mattered, I want you to know it did, and now it's your turn to pass it forward. Because the world needs to hear from men like you, men who never asked to be heroes, but became them anyway.